We had yet another shooting at Fort Hood. The last one was in 2009, and back then it was 13 people who were killed, 30 people who were wounded. It was a psychiatrist, or a former psychiatrist, I should say, who snapped and went all over the place killing people. This time we have 4 people killed, 16 people injured, and 3 people that are still in critical condition. The shooting, of course, happened yesterday. The shooter has been identified as 34-year-old specialist Ivan Lopez. He worked at Fort Hood only a short time. He transferred there. He used a .45 caliber semi-automatic handgun, and at the end, he killed himself. He was an active duty soldier who worked as a truck driver for the U.S. Army. He served 4 months in Iraq, and he was reportedly being treated for mental illness, but had not yet been officially diagnosed with PTSD. There are some reports, some news organizations are saying that he referred to some sort of head trauma, that he had some sort of head trauma, which led to anxiety and depression. Other news organizations are questioning whether or not that's correct, because apparently there's no evidence of him saying that, or no evidence of there actually being head trauma, so that's up in the air. But according to Lieutenant General Mark Milley, he had sought help for depression, anxiety, and other problems, and he was taking medication, although, of course, we don't know if at the time of the shooting he was off his meds. But the shootings have become so commonplace in the country that they don't even really faze us anymore. You know, and I'm guilty of it just as much as anybody else. I mean, they don't even make the news if it's just one person or 2 people dying. In order for it to make the news, it has to be kids involved, so it has to be at like a school or something like that, or it has to be at a military base. So the one from 2009, the Fort Hood shooting, of course, that was big news, and now this one, of course, is big news again. But it's amazing that we've become so jaded to it that, you know, a shooting where 1 person or 2 people or even 3 people die, it's like, well, the bar is higher for us to actually give a shit at this point. So we just, act like nothing happens. And there was a time in the country that, if something like this were to happen, it would have a ripple effect throughout all of the country. So, for example, I remember, I'm a golf fan, and I remember that when I was watching, a golf event years ago, I don't know when it was, 2006, 2007, whenever, there was some kind of shooting, and they stopped to talk about it. The announcers talked about it at the golf event and said, like, a very somber day, our prayers and our hopes and our thoughts go out to the families, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's not even, like, just everything else is business as usual. It gets covered, a story like this gets covered, but it's just like, well, what did you expect? Of course, another shooting, that's what happens. And you have to remember, this is a problem that is unfortunately unique to America. The other modern industrial nations don't have this issue. They don't have this problem where, every few months, well, they're right on time, there's that mass shooting we were expecting. So what I want to do is give you guys an overview as to what the actual problem is. Let's take a step back here, look at the total picture, and let's go over the numbers. Let's be as objective and as empirical about this as we can possibly be to try to determine just how big of a problem it really is. So how many total gun violence incidents have there been in the year 2014 so far? Okay, so just in 2014, there's been 10,102. Just 2014. Okay, that's 3 months. January, February, March. And a couple days. 10,102. How many injuries have there been? 4,280. How many deaths have resulted from guns in the year 2014 so far? 2,624. Now, this goes back to the point I just made before. How many of those 2,624 deaths have we really heard detailed coverage about in the news? I think this is the first one, the first shooting in 2014 that we gave like real serious coverage to. Maybe there was one other one, but 2,642 human beings dead because of guns in the United States of America in the year 2014. All right, now we get into, even deeper waters here, because now it gets wild. So it wasn't that long ago, it was just a few months ago, that there were these articles all over the place. I saw it on CNN, on RT, all over the place. It was this huge story about how, well, look, Iraq's a mess now. There's just this violent mess in Iraq, and people are dying all over the place. So how many people died in Iraq in that really dangerous year that there were articles written over? 7,000. 7,000 people died in Iraq when it was, oh my God, it's so violent, we need to write a news story about it and cover it. How many people died? Now let's make a comparison here. So that's Iraq, wild, wild West Iraq, primitive Iraq with, the idea is there's the Taliban over here and some Al-Qaeda sprinkled in some places and warring factions and a civil war and bombs and be scared, be afraid, 7,000 deaths. Ah! In the U.S., how many people die on just your average year? Just on average, how many people die every year from gun violence? 32,000. 32,000. Really, really think about that for a second. Put politics completely aside, whether you're Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, communist, fascist, I don't give a fuck what you are. All of that aside, 32,000 deaths from gun violence in the U.S. There were 7,000 deaths in Iraq in 2013, and there were articles written about how dangerous Iraq is nowadays. More people dead in the United States of America. But we're still not done. Unfortunately, I got a lot more numbers here. From December 14th, 2012, which is the day when Sandy Hook happened, the Sandy Hook school shooting. From December 14th, 2012 until today, how many people have been killed by guns in America? Now remember, really not that long ago, man. December 14th, 2012. I mean, that's just a little over a year ago, not too long over a year ago. 44,364 people. 44,364 people dead in America from guns just since Sandy Hook. In fact, I want to give you one more piece of information here. One more fact that I think is the most telling fact of all on gun violence in America. Did you know that if you take all of the U.S. military and coalition deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan, so in the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, add up all of the U.S. military deaths and coalition deaths, and then you multiply that by 5, it still doesn't equal the gun deaths we've had at home in America just since Newtown. You think we have a problem? I mean, I don't know. Look, you guys know me. I'm a guy. I'm the biggest person on, quantity that there is. Like, I love to look at numbers. I love to view things in an empirical realm, in a realm where there's nothing but data. I want to get as much data as possible to try to figure things out because I trust the numbers. Numbers never lie. I don't care what anybody's opinion is on a given issue. I care more about the actual reality. So when I look at numbers like this, they drive me crazy because anybody who's willing to look at this with a sober mind says we have a gigantic problem in America because these are preventable deaths. Like if you want to talk about, so take, people could respond, yeah, well, a lot of people die from drinking too much alcohol every year. Yeah, but you know what? That's more of a personal decision, and the person is only affecting themselves. And granted, they have a problem, and I want to help them, and I think they should get psychological treatment or, some sort of addiction treatment. Of course. But if it's something like that, you're just affecting yourself. So there's more of a, oh, okay, it happens element to that. Not saying that it should be a flippant attitude, but that's more acceptable. For something like this, where a lot of these deaths that we're talking about, over 12,000 of them are killing of other people. A lot of them are suicides, but over 12,000 killing of other people with guns. All right, this is a problem, man. And we could speculate all day long as to what the actual, root cause is. So what is the problem? Is it that we're so overworked and overstressed and undersexed in America that we just fucking snap after a while? People just snap, that we get no vacation time by law, where every other modern industrial nation has some vacation time by law. Does that have something to do with it? I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I really don't know. Does the economy have something to do with it, that there's a war on the middle class and a war on the poor, and that where people are struggling to get by while there's tremendous income inequality, and you have basically 0.1% of the population that run everything? Does that have something to do with it? I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Is it some psychological issues that we have across the country, depression, anxiety? But is that really worse here than it is in other places? I don't know what the answer is, but I do know what the fucking solution is. And you say, well, how do you know that, Kyle? Well, again, it goes back to the data. It goes back to, well, we have other places in the world that have different laws and they get a different outcome. Is it some sort of coincidence that all of the countries that have sane gun laws don't have gun deaths? No, it's not. In fact, don't take my word for it. How about the recent Harvard study that was done, when they concluded that, well, where there's more guns, there's more gun violence. Really? I couldn't figure that one out. So why is it that in France there's less than 100 gun deaths every single year? Britain, less than 100 gun deaths every single year. Australia, less than 100 gun deaths every single year. You name the modern industrial European nation. They don't have this issue. Us, 32,000 gun deaths every single year. And look, even within the United States, you see it. And what I mean by that is the country that has the highest amount of gun violence and gun deaths per capita, Alaska. And they have some of the laxest gun laws. We're not asking for much, man. We're not asking for much. What we're asking for is a universal background check system that has strict rules and regulations associated with it. So, for example, this guy, the fact that he was being treated for depression and anxiety, you shouldn't have a gun. Period, period, period. End of discussion. This guy bought the gun at the same place that the last mass shooter who shot up Fort Hood bought his gun from. There's a problem there, man. There's a problem. As of right now, the current federal law only bars people who have been involuntarily committed to inpatient mental health treatment or officially adjudicated mentally ill by a court from owning a firearm. So that means you could still be, have depression, have anxiety, have PTSD, but they can't take your gun from you. Because you need to be officially declared that from a court, as opposed to from like the psychiatrist or the psychologist himself, who's a fucking expert on that issue. We got to have a universal background check that makes sure people like this can't get their hands on firearms. We have to do, I always talk about, it's a very important one to limit the size of magazines, no more high-capacity magazines, because it's just mathematics. If the guy who bust into, did the Aurora shooting in the movie theater, if he only had a clip that could hold 5 bullets, more people would be alive, because it takes time to reload it. Somebody could tackle him. In fact, that's what happened in the Tucson shooting. Somebody tackled him while he was reloading his clip. So we need to have a limit on high-capacity magazines. We need to have universal background checks with strict rules and regulations. We need to, possibly think about banning assault weapons again, because when we had the assault weapons ban temporarily beforehand, it worked, man. It worked. There were less gun incidents with assault weapons. No fucking shit. If we just see what we can learn from other nations that still have... There's still a level of freedom, okay? Still a level of, you're allowed to have a firearm, If you're a law-abiding citizen and you're not a criminal or a psychopath or a terrorist, of course, go ahead, have a firearm, no problem with it whatsoever. But there's got to be a system that is comprehensive, that makes sense, so we can prevent these things from happening. And look, even if after we implement all these things, let's say the number of gun deaths every year in America drops to 10,000, okay? A lot of people that are in the gun anarchist movement would say, see, there's still 10,000 people that die. Your regulations didn't work. But the number now is 32,000, you dipshit. Do the math on that. You'd be saving 22,000 lives. Are they not worth anything? Of course, they're not worth anything, because it's all an intellectual exercise to the gun anarchists until it's somebody in their family that gets killed. And then it's like, oh, wow, well, this is kind of fucked up. It's time to wake up, man, because this is just going to keep on happening unless we do something about it.